Alright, so this is going to be What If Asta Had Sunshine Part 4. And with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
They trip took it to 10.
Let me tell you how I come through with the 1-2, kicking shit like kung fu. Treat a bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, no hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
So before the What If actually starts, I would like to say thank you guys for getting me to 800 subscribers. I really appreciate that. So with that, with reaching 800, I'm gonna try to make this a little bit longer than usual, at least for a Black Clover video, because those are like 40 minutes, right? So this video is gonna be long since I have to go through the arc after the dungeon and everything in between that. So yeah, so our story actually takes place a week after the events of the dungeon kind of quest, right? So Asta did not go through that same experience that the canon version of Asta did, where he had to basically recover for a week. Since Asta in this What If actually held his own without getting injured, really, he's actually took that time to kind of learn his kind of lunar scythe, Artemis, or crescent scythe, Artemis, and like all the magic that has to do with moonlight magic, right? So you guys can tell me down below what kind of spells you want for that kind of side of his grimoire. So you guys can just comment down the name of the spell and then what it does, right? Because right now I only have like maybe one or two. So Asta, Noelle, and the rest of the Black Bulls are actually eating breakfast as you would usually do, and this is when Yami actually comes to the door and he tells Luck, Noelle, and Asta about how they need to make a report to the Wizard King on their findings in the dungeon. But Yami takes a second look at Luck and says that he's not going since he would make too much of a scene. So only Noelle and Asta are going. So they make their trip to the capital, and on their way they actually see and meet up with the Golden Dawn. That group that includes Klaus and Mimosa. And Klaus is very happy to see Asta and see that he wasn't really that injured, because since that day he has gained a new respect for commoners, right? Just how he does in canon. And Mimosa, she's kind of shy and kind of runs off. And Asta's kind of he's kind of confused about this, wondering why she would have left. And then this is when Noelle actually goes over to ask on why she did that. So Mimosa basically tells Noelle that whenever she's around Asta, she kind of has this weird feeling, and she thinks that it's love. And she kind of starts, freaking out, and Noelle kind of has a similar reaction, thinking that maybe she has feelings for Asta as well. And they both start kind of freaking out in the distance, and all three of the male members there actually notice, and they question this, not knowing what's going on. And they kind of, not think much of it, right? So they continue their walk towards the capital so they could meet with the Wizard King. And that's when they're about to go to trying to find where exactly at the palace the Wizard King actually lives, or where he's at currently. And Asta would be like, "Hey, Four Eyes, do you not know where you're going?" And Klaus would be like, "Well, us Four Eyes don't know everything. It should be around here. We don't come to the capital too often." And before he could actually finish his sentence, this is when a door opens and the Wizard King comes through. Asta, so everyone kind of bows, except for kind of Asta and until a second later, where Klaus basically pushes them down on the ground, or not on the ground, but makes them kneel, right? And Asta sees the Wizard King, right? So the first thing that Asta says to the Wizard King is, when I become Wizard King, will I also have a robe just like yours? And will it be big enough for my person? And listening to this, the Wizard King would laugh, and Klaus would be like, Asta, you can't say that, right? And so would Mimosa and Noelle. But the Wizard King were like, well, if you request it, then yeah, you're the Wizard King. You could basically ask him to do whatever you want. So they would walk in, and they would go to the kind of tower area where they kind of go to examine the magics. So as that's happening, the Wizard King would comment on all the different types of magic they got, or magical items, and the new magic they got. So he'd be like, wow, this is some really powerful stuff that you got. I'm glad that the Diamond Kingdom wasn't able to get much, even though they kind of did. So Yuno would show the Wizard King his grimoire, and he would be like, wow, this is some pretty impressive magic. And he would think in his head, so the wind spirit Sylph, one of the 4 major elements, because I'm pretty sure that's her name, Sylph. And he would basically he would ask Yuno to use the spell, and he would say that he doesn't know how, because he never really got a chance to, I believe, if I remember right. He wasn't able to use it because Asta saved himself, basically, if I remember that. If not, then you could just correct me in the comments, because I don't remember. And then this is when Asta would be up, and he would basically show the Wizard King his grimoire and what the new spell he got. And the Wizard King would be basically ecstatic at this point, because he's like, wow, I've never seen some sort of like magical item change your entire magic. You used to have sunlight magic, but now you have celestial body magic, and that would mean that he has sunlight and moonlight magic. So he would ask him, like, can you do this spell for me? And Asta would take out the crescent scythe Artemis, and he would basically give it to the Wizard King to kind of carry. And the Wizard King would find it difficult to lift it, even though it is a 2-handed weapon, since it is a scythe and not a sickle. So yeah. So this is when the Wizard King would actually suggest them for them to actually join him for the kind of not royal knights, the kind of ceremony, like kind of a rewarding the knights who have gotten many stars. So it's that kind of ceremony where it would be the Wizard King calling up names and telling them how many stars they got, and they would basically become like a junior class or mid-class knight and stuff like that, right? So we're gonna kind of skip that part, since there isn't like any difference that would happen, because Asta doesn't talk in that scene at all or really interact until the banquet that happens afterwards. So we're just gonna kind of skip that part. So we would get to the part where it's at the banquet. We follow the different magic knights and the group that Asta came in with eating, basically kind of separated because they kind of feel ostracized at that kind of banquet. And Klaus would comment on this, saying that why would the Wizard King put us in this kind of ordeal, knowing that there's so much resentment in this, because there's still this kind of hatred for commoners, right? So this is what the nobles would comment on, right? So Asta would start eating a lot of food, just how he normally would, and Mimosa would try to get closer by asking him if she could join him, which he would see no reason why not to let her join. And this is when most of the nobles there would comment. I guess they're not nobles. Some of them are nobles, but most of them are royalty there. And they would basically say like, oh, having commoners here eating like this is basically like having a rat in the kingdom. And Asta would have no real problem with them saying this really, because he doesn't care about their opinions. So it would kind of continue like that, right? People in his group, Asta's group, Klaus and the others, would be kind of surprised at the fact that Asta didn't care. Like Klaus would be kind of surprised, and so would be Mimosa, but not really Noelle or really, because they're kind of used to that, how he is during the day. So this is when Leopold would basically say that if he was there at the dungeon, he would have done a much better job, right? And he would also comment on the other Golden Dawn members that are there, saying that they also have a commoner, or didn't they already like recently get a commoner in their group? And the Golden Dawn members would be, specifically the I believe it's a sand mage, would respond most of the time. He would basically say like, yes, even though he's a commoner, it's not like we expect much out of him, but he is still Golden Dawn. And he would kind of belittle at this point, and Klaus would kind of step in and say, but sir, Asta and have done such a great, and then like before he could finish his sentence, the sand mage would just kind of interrupt him and say, Klaus, don't you feel ashamed for even being associated with these people? And he would kind of like belittle Klaus as well, because of how he's close to the commoners. And Mimosa would do the same thing, Mimosa would try to like kind of support Klaus, but then again he would also point out the fact that she was injured during the fight and made herself kind of a liability. And this is when Solid would actually comment on the fact, or he would be like, come on, we all know who's the most useless member there. And this is to imply his younger sister, Noelle. And he basically goes up to her and pours water on her, basically ruining whatever she was doing. And the only thing that she could say would be like, why? And Solid would continue belittling her, berating her, saying that he would say like, even though you're royalty, just because you joined the Black Bull, you think you're so much better, but you're still the useless person that you always been. And he would say like, why couldn't you die instead of mother, right? And this is when Noelle's about to kind of leave, and this is when Asta would actually grab her arm and say, Noelle, you do not need to concern yourself with insect like these, right? Kind of using her own words that she used against him on them. But Asta would it'd make more sense for Asta since he's a lot bigger than everyone else, right? Physically, at least. And Asta would basically go in front of everyone, not really having to go on the table like he does in canon, and he would say that your comments do not affect me in any way. They do not apply to me. They are untrue and only reflect what you believe about yourselves. And he would basically say that commoners, peasants, middle class and royalty, even nobility and even royalty, have no meaning to me. I am the one who's above it all, and I am going to be the future Wizard King. But when you say these things to my squad members, someone who is on the same squad as mine, I cannot accept that. And before he could even finish, this is when the sand mage actually goes and grabs him, or uses bind magic, that kind of like sand magic that he uses. Or actually, he doesn't use the bind magic at first. He actually tries to like use sand magic, like normal sand magic at him. And this is when Asta would just take out Rita and basically cut it. Basically, his mana is like so enormous that it basically cuts through spells, right? Just how like if your like power is like so much greater than someone else's in Black Clover, then you could just like, it's not nullifying the spell, it's just you're just going through it, right? This is you could see an example of this with the fight versus Mario Leona versus Raya. That entire fight, she's just punching through every spell he has, even though they're both like really high tier magic users. So this is basically what he would do. And the next people that would go and try to fight him would be Solid, and he would just try to shoot that kind of sea serpent that he would use. And again, Asta would just use Rita to kind of just cut it and make it evaporate, because even though it's a weakness, his water magic is so weak compared to his celestial body magic that it's not really much of a contest. So both mages would be shocked that Asta could do this. They'd be like, how much mana does this Commodore even have? It doesn't make sense. We're royalty. Well, obviously not the other guy, but Solid is royalty. So next up would be, I believe it would be Nebra. I think she would use her kind of mist magic to kind of like make mist solid clones, and she would shoot out her kind of mist magic. And again, Asta would have no difficulty really defending himself. He wouldn't really need his axe. He would just use like a cruel sun and kind of shoot it out at them. And he would basically say, no matter how many clones you have, you could never live up to my greatness. And I think at this point, even Leopold would join in the fight, even though he didn't in canon. Because if you remember, not only did at the beginning, when Asta, when they were going to like raise their hands, every captain rose their hand to try to get Asta, but Asta basically insulted the top three captains and went with the worst squad, which was the Black Bulls, to prove a point that even though he's so much better than everyone else, he's going to make the Black Bulls the best and become the Wizard King through that. So Leopold would be like, you insulted my brother and you have the gall to insult us here even now? And he would basically try to fight him with his like his twin cyclones, I think they're called. These kind of fire magic where he shoots with both of his hands. And what Asta would do is that he would use a setting sun, which is basically a small cruel sun, and he would go towards Leopold in the middle of his like cyclone and basically blow it up to kind of cancel it out, right? So after that was done, this is when the sand mage would come back again and try to use his binding magic against them. And it would be that kind of giant kind of golem, or that soldier that would just kind of like grab him with his hands. And Asta would just basically get out of it using physical strength, just how Asta did kind of with his arm. And he would just like walk through it. And he would tell this mage like, do you think a few grains of sand can stop me? I am basically a mountain and you are less than a grain of sand to me. And the nobles, because this would be like face to face, and the noble being a lot shorter than Asta would be very intimidated. And this is when or a little bit before that, when he's still binded, this is when this is when Solid actually uses one of his more powerful kind of attacks, because he was basically insulted by the Commodore. or Asta, he would use his water bullet. And this is when Asta would walk out and basically tank the shot using his kind of magical aura to kind of evaporate it, if that makes sense, using that kind of heat aura. So this is when, after he would say that to the sand mage, this is when Nozel would actually do something similar, where he kind of makes his magical presence known more, where he kind of chills out the room, and that's basically what he does. And before he basically says that this commoner, or he tells Solid not to waste his time for commoner, because he will be the one who punishes him. And this is when not Nozel, this is when Fogolion actually steps in. So Fogolion would basically say that maybe this commoner was right to insult us, because his thing is about, like, if you're like, Fogolion's whole thing is that he respects people that are strong, and anyone could get strong in his opinion, because that famous saying that he says, being weak is not a problem, staying weak is, something like that, right? So he would basically say, yeah, maybe he was right to insult us. It takes this many knights just to gang up on one rookie. It's pathetic. And they would kind of have that kind of standoff between Fogolion and Nozel. And before they could actually do anything, this is when the actual kingdom gets attacked, just how it does in the anime. So they get the kind of alert, and the stone mage basically makes that construct of the city, showing what's happening. And this is the attack where Radies comes with his kind of wraith magic that controls that kind of zombies, right? So each of the knights there are looking at the constructs, and they're trying to find a good way of attack. And Fogolion goes and takes the leadership role. And as this is happening, Asta doesn't care. He's like, I'm going to save as many lives as possible, so I'm going to leave as soon as possible. So as he leaves, this is when Leopold would actually leave with him, because he doesn't want to get shown off by the guy who insulted his brother. So he would go and join him. Even though it looks like in the anime, it looks like it's nighttime, and it's actually not. This is pretty early in the day. So I would say this is around noon. So Asta is his strongest at this point. So basically what would happen is that he would find where Radies is basically fighting this, or not fighting, he has this girl kind of hostage. And I guess before that, he would go through that kind of wave of zombies, and he would just walk through the kind of rubble and slice zombies in half with his axe, basically one-shotting anything that goes past him pretty easily and efficiently. So by the time he gets to Radies, he would kind of say, like, you think you could get through my waves of undead? And he would check, like, behind Asta, and he would see that kind of trail of corpses that he left behind. And then back at the capital, where Fogolion's making the plan, he basically says, each squad kind of split up in their own kind of group, and then I will go after Leopold and he basically brings Noelle as well, but he's basically going after Asta and Leopold. So that's kind of their part of the role in their plan. And Asta and Radies are kind of, this is where they go to fight. And Radies takes out his number 4, Jimmy. So Jimmy's power is that he shoots curse bullets. So what that means is if Asta gets hit, then those cuts don't heal. and they continue to bleed. That's basically what the magic does. So as he's about to fight Jimmy, this is when a kid that was getting protected unknowingly from Asta tells him, like, are you sure you could beat him? And Asta would look at this kid like, of course I can, just kind of stay behind me. And this is when Jimmy starts shooting the kind of curse bullets. But what Asta would do is basically use his divine axe to basically cut through each of the bullets. I think 1 or 2 might have hit him, so this is making Asta bleed, but not too much. It doesn't do that much damage. It only kind of scrapes him, but it is a scrape that doesn't stop bleeding. So eventually Asta would just make a cruel sun and basically burn him, because the corpses are very they don't really like fire that much. So this is around the point where Leopold would come near Asta, but he's not able to help since there's still so many zombies around him. And it's also around the time when Noelle and Fogolion would be in around the same general area as him. So he would get to number 2, because number 3 he doesn't use on Asta. He uses number 3 on Noelle and Leopold. So number 2 would appear, and this would be Alfred. So Alfred, what he is basically a floating kind of amputee, I guess, that shoots like electricity. So Asta would kind of have to block his shots, but also try to attack at the same time, which would be kind of difficult for him since he's still protecting that little girl. And since Alfred is flying through the air, it makes it harder for him to hit him as well, because he has more places to dodge. So what Asta does is he makes a bunch of small setting suns, right? And he kind of shoots them in random directions. See, at least that's what Radies thinks. He's like, what are you doing? Are you some sort of idiot? Those aren't hitting. You're not even getting close to Alfred here. And Asta would be like, I know, that's not the plan. And this is basically like Hellzone. Like, this is basically Piccolo's attack Hellzone grenade, where he shoots a bunch of ki in random directions and basically makes them all swarm onto one target. So that's basically what Asta does, but with these setting suns. And this fries up what's it called, Alfred, without really having Asta have any trouble. So this is when Asta goes against Radies number 1, which I believe his name is Carl. And this mage was very good at defensive magic with some offense in there. So when Asta tries to throw a cruel sun at this figure, he actually uses his kind of barrier to block it. And Asta's kind of intrigued, right? He's like, do you think you could just win by blocking? I don't think that's the right decision, but it's your funeral. But Radies is like, you idiot. He wasn't just a master at defense magic, but also attacking magic. And this is when he would launch several kind of spikes towards Asta, and he would basically say that, how does it feel to have an impenetrable or how does it feel to combine a perfect defense with a rapid fire attack? And Asta would use, this is one of the spells that a commenter actually told me about, but I'm gonna change the name because the name that he gave doesn't really fit the magic, so I'm just gonna call it Sundome. So this is when Asta would say celestial body magic Sundome, and it's basically this kind of dome, made out of sunlight that would go around him, that would form this kind of protective barrier, similar to what Yami could do, but just sunlight, and basically it's just a defense spell. And Asta's thinking a way to kind of go through this kind of spell. And before he could do anything, this is when a blue kind of beam goes through the barrier of Carl. And this blue beam actually came from Fogolion. And he basically says to Asta, I didn't appreciate you, making fun of me at the night selection ceremony, but you earned that right now, or you earned that right because you have so much strength, right? Because he really respects that. And you made kind of this, it's similar to the kind of oath that Fogolion has on his forehead. That kind of diamond shape, that's the oath that he has to become the Wizard King. And also has something similar with the Black Bulls, choosing them. So Fogolion would basically say, Asta, you're my rival as well. And Radies would be devastated that all of his puppets were kind of destroyed. And number 3 is still fighting like what's it called, Leopold and Noelle, right? And they would still beat him just how they do in canon. And this is around the point where, seeing that his own brother called Asta a rival, Leopold would do the same and call Asta a rival, right? And this is the point where Radies kind of loses, and he basically, Fogolion uses his binding magic on him, right? And tells him, you had a lot of strength, right? You have a lot of magical power within you. If you had a just heart, then you would have stayed as a magical knight, right? And because you're so vile and wicked, they had every right to expel you, because they would have known his backstory, right? So, this is when Fogolion goes and checks his grimoire, and Radies is just kind of freaking out, right? And when Fogolion actually looks at his grimoire, it's only 1 page. And Fogolion is confused because he's never seen a grimoire like this. He's like, only 1 page? Is that even possible? Does that mean he only has 1 spell? And Radies is basically saying, like, he's like, don't look at that, that's mine, it's personal, I don't want to hear you, laugh at me and things like that, right? And this is when a kind of like small like earpiece is like in his ear and starts like speaking to him, and this person basically says to him that, all right, you had your fun, you weren't able to defeat a captain, you still got a lot to learn, so let's just leave and try again next time, right? And this is when he starts mumbling to himself like, no, I could have won, I just needed more time and things like that, right? And this is when the spatial mage actually makes portals all over the kind of capital, and actually sucks up the captains and most of the most of the magical knights, including Fogolion. And this is when has that kind of fight with the ash mage or ash witch. I think her name was, it started with a C, I forgot. But basically, yeah, he has that fight, and it still goes as in canon, where he wins and unlocks the spirit and things like that. But we're gonna focus more on Asta, right? So after a few seconds, or a few minutes, I guess, after Fogolion goes into that white room and actually sees someone, it's probably Licht, I think, and maybe the other members of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. And basically what happens next is that Fogolion comes back. He's on the ground. he's missing his right arm and he's bleeding out. So what Asta would do, he would rush over to Fogolion and basically use his spell. He would use healing sun rays to basically not heal him up where he had a complete new arm, but kind of stop the bleeding, right? Because he doesn't have that much of a enhanced kind of healing spell, right? He's not like the kind of that kind of, I think it was like jelly. I don't think it was like jelly. Cause that water mage that has like really advanced healing magic. He's not that kind of level, right? So as this is happening, Noelle basically tells Asta that basically mentions that the spatial mage is somewhere near, right? And Asta kind of like, he kind of uses his key, right? The key in Black Clover is a little bit different. It's kind of like magic sensing but a little bit more accurate, I guess. It's based on your hearing, your sense of smell, your breathing, your kind of like life in general, right? Kind of like sensing where life is, right? And this is kind of in canon. This is kind of the first times Asta really uses it to find the spatial mage. So in this one, we're gonna have Asta learn key as well from Yami and from just basically picking it up. So he would know where he would somehow know where the mage is at, right? Using key, but he wouldn't know that at the time. So he would just do that to kind of know where it's at in the general area, and then he would just use his divine axe to cut through a bunch of corpses. And this is when the spatial mage would actually jump out. And this spatial mage would be Valto, I believe his name is. He's basically, I'm pretty sure it's Valto. So he would say like, I can't believe you were able to find me even with this disgusting disguise. And that's when he would remove his kind of zombie mask, right? And he would say that, well, okay, he'd be like, okay, Radies, we need to leave. The show's over. So this is when he would kind of try to open a portal underneath Radies, right? And Asta wouldn't be close enough to kind of catch Radies. So what he would do is that he would basically stop the magic from happening. And the way that he would do that is that he would throw a cruel sun at Valto. This would cause Valtos to kind of stumble back and kind of stop his spell. And Radies would be in danger after this because Leopold would go after him because of what they did to his brother. And this is when that kind of group would come back, right? Or not the group, they wouldn't come back, but they would appear, the extra members of the Midnight Sun, or the Eye of the Midnight Sun. And at this point, Asta he is kind of weaker right now because of those cuts that he got from the curse bullets, right? Because he doesn't know if his healing light could like stop curse magic, right? So as he's fighting these the Eye of the Midnight Sun, he just goes and tries to kind of heal himself, right? And this kind of works, not necessarily all fully. It basically stops the bleeding, but the wounds are still kind of open, right? So it kind of heals it halfway through. So with him being able to fight more, he's still weaker because of how much blood he lost, and the sun starting, it's not sundown or even close, but it's past noon, right? So he's not gonna get any stronger. So this is they start trying to fight, and they have a bunch of back and forths. And when they all surround Asta, this is when Noelle would use that dragon's cradle. No, it was like sea dragon's cradle or something like that. I forgot the spell, but basically that kind of dome that she has, it would basically protect them from the spells that are incoming. but one of the mages would use kind of his root magic to kind of drain the magic from that thing, right? From the shield. And this is when Asta and Leopold would kind of rush towards the other mages, right? Or the ones using that drain magic. And this is when one of the wind mages would use his wind magic, which would be that kind of wind drill that he uses. And it would affect Leopold more because it wouldn't hit Asta in many places as it did Leopold or Asta in canon. It would only hit him like in his shoulder, and that's basically it, right? But it would still hurt, and it would be another wound for Asta to heal later, right? And before they could get another attack in, this is when Nozel and the rest of the magical knights come, and they actually come down to support Asta and Leopold. So Valtos would question on how they got here so fast, and one of the mages would say, like, if I had to give it a name, I would probably call it combination magic. But I know that's not the right name, I just don't remember what the guy actually used, so forgive me on that. So this is when Nozel would go down and see what happened to Fogolion, and Solid and Nebra would kind of laugh, right? Solid would be like, what's the point in a magic knight if they can't win? Someone like that shouldn't exist. And Nebra would agree and say, like, yes, how far the rebellion name has gone, right? Because Fogolion's on the ground, almost dead, right? This is when Nozel tells Solid to basically be quiet. We're less than him since he was actually here to fight, and tells Solid to go around the capital to kind of secure the safety, right? And he tells Nebra to go follow. So this is when he basically tells the Eye of the Midnight Sun that they're going to pay for doing this to Fogolion, and he uses a spell. He goes like Mercury Magic, Rain of Silver, and this is when one of the Eye of the Midnight Suns, I forgot the name of her name. She was the one with the sticky salamander. She basically says, "Go, sticky salamander," and she actually uses a dark magic item to kind of increase the absorption rate on him, to kind of absorb the spell as it's coming down. So as she's doing this, she kind of she uses her salamander to go and pick up Asta, right? Just how they do in canon. And Asta's a lot weaker because it's closer to sunset. He's physically weaker, and he's drained because of the curse magic and because of how much he's been fighting. Since not only did he have to fight Radies and his 4 puppets, but he also had to fight the nobles earlier, right? So he's used up a lot of magic. So he's kind of stuck in that kind of slime, right? So they would use that kind of, Valtos would use his like spatial magic to kind of get out of there. And Nozel or Noelle would be like, we need to go find him, right? And Klaus would basically tell her that there's no way we can. We don't know how to track him, and we don't know where they went. So there's no good way to find him. And this is when Nozel would say, like, our main duty right now is to secure the peace here in the capital. We don't have time to go after some kid, right? So later on, it's sunset, right? And they're bringing in Asta to this kind of like their hidden kind of base where the stone tablets at. And the person who's waiting there is actually the Wizard King. And the reason why Asta doesn't use his like moonlight magic is because there is that kind of between time where it's not really sunset, but it's also not when the moon comes up either. So there's that kind of weak point for both, where he can't really use either one really efficiently. So that's the reason I'm giving, right? So the Wizard King would basically be like, hey Asta, looks like we always seem to meet up here in the strangest places. And this is when the Wizard King would just go in front of like, or on the sides of two masked individuals, right? And he would basically shoot two orbs of blue light, but this is like his time magic, right? And he would just shoot them almost near instantly, and this would basically completely erase the two mages that he just shot with, who just got shot with his magic, right? And the Wizard King would basically say that, alright, the first person to surrender, I'll let live, right? Come on, don't be shy. And all of them in unison basically says, not a chance. And he's like, alright. And they all start shooting their magic at him, but he basically keeps on dodging them using his time magic. And he actually goes behind them and says, I want to see if this works. It might be a little bit of a challenge since there's so many of you. And he uses he says, time magic, time binding magic, chronostasis. And he basically, this blue wave goes over them, and they're all in these kind of orbs with these rings of Roman numerals going around the orbs, right? And this is when Asta gets out of his kind of slime that he was in, or the slime that he was in. So he would basically get up, and this is when the Wizard King would say like, wow, Asta, I thought you were tired. You're pretty tough, even just for being a rookie. I think you are next in line to be the Wizard King. And Asta would be like, yeah, that's what I've been telling everyone. And the Wizard King would just laugh, and they would basically he would go to the kind of stone tablet, and he would kind of question what's like why is this like designed this way? I've never seen this writing. Why are these gems here? And he would basically ask them like, why is this the way it is, right? And he would kind of say like, well, I guess you can't talk right now. We'll do a lot of chatting at the kingdom, right? And this is when a bright light appears in the back of the cave, and the Wizard King gets this serious face on him, and he basically says, get ready, there's someone that we're about to fight. And this fight basically happens in an instant. It's the like in canon, not Deku, Asta doesn't see this, but since he has celestial body magic that has like sunlight magic, he'd be able to see this, since it is also like light magic. So he'd be able to see this fight against Julius and Licht, and he would see Licht's arm get kind of be basically hit by the beam, basically making it aged. And after this flash was over, the only one left was, or the only one that Licht didn't take was this like random mage, right? So the Wizard King's like, alright, we lost most of them, but we kept this guy, so let's go to the capital and see or he would get that transmission from his assistant, and then that's when they would go to the capital to see what was happening. So I think I'll end it here. I would like to say, thank you for, the 800 subscribers, and, subscribe to the sins down below. And with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. So yeah,